very much on apprenticeships over the course of the week. We have a number of resources going up online as well, so really encourage you to go to the website, where we have a number of videos and further information as well, basically in relation to apprenticeships and students with disabilities. So my name is Gary McLattery. I am the Head of Disability Inclusion Support Services at Trent University. I'm also advisor to the Board of Directors at NADP on conferences. So hopefully I can get this one right. Basically, I'll be co-hosting this webinar with Annie Beckett from Brighton University, and I'll get Annie just to say a few words.
Oh, hi. So I'm Annie Beckett from the University of Brighton. I became one of the new NADP directors last summer. So I've been helping to put together this week with Gary. Gary's been amazing. The theme of the session is on apprenticeships. My background is that I'm the Disability Support Services Manager at the University of Brighton. And I think, like many institutions, we're seeing an increasing number of students who are coming through on apprenticeship programs. And because of the way that they're funded, or the way that the courses are set up and structured, it's quite a challenge trying to provide support or just adapt our systems to make sure they meet the needs of this new group cohort of students. And so we thought this week would be a good opportunity just to explore some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that presents. So I'll pass it back to Gary.
That's great, thanks, Annie. So the panel we have today, we have Deb Tovey and Helen Davies from Aston University. They'll be first up doing a short presentation and taking some questions. Then we have Marissa Hill, the Disabled Student Support Manager at Sheffield Hallam University. Then we have Lindsay Conroy, who is the Management and the Programme Lead for Apprenticeships at UCAS. Then we have Simon Hawthorne, who's a student himself, and will be able to give a student perspective, and works as a Programme Lead at Transport for London. And finally, Trevor Boland from AHEAD in Ireland as the Digital Technology Inclusion will be offering some perspectives on the benefits of assistive technology in terms of supporting student apprentices. So just a few bits of housekeeping just before we start really. Firstly, again, as I said just at the beginning there, just to draw your attention to the events in week 5, the in-person events. We have an event in London at the University of the Arts. We're at Swansea. There's an event in Swansea now. Sure the exact location, but it's on our website. We're also Edinburgh Napier University in Scotland. There'll be an event during that week commencing the 27th of June. And at Ulster University, which I'll make an appearance myself at, will be on the 29th of June in Belfast. So I really encourage you to sign up to come along to that. They are £50, but I think it's a worthwhile event to come along to network colleagues and to meet colleagues at a time, given what we've experienced over 2 years, not be able to mingle and network in person. It really is, having to do it again, it's the most enjoyable experience. The other disclaimer just is to say that the interpretation is being delivered live. We'll do our best in terms of accuracy, but we've provided some information to our interpreters. But with being live and the content being continuous and unknown, there may be some inaccuracies, and just to bear that in mind during the course of this session. And finally, just any questions, if you can put them into the Q&A, that'd be great, and we'll post them. And Annie will be sort of picking those out, and we'll try and get as many of those done as we can across the afternoon. So each sort of presentation will run about 15 minutes, and that'll include some questions. And if we have time for questions at the end, we'll table those to the group as a whole. So first, we'll start off with Deb Tovey and Helen Davies. Now I'm going to get myself right here in terms of the job roles. Deb is the Disability Advisor at Aston University and works specifically with the Social Sciences Business Schools and the School of Law, and also works with estates and accommodation. And Deb's been in teaching for over 30 years prior to joining the university, including a number of years in special educational needs. Helen is the lead assessor, teacher specialist dyslexia, and at the university, and does training for academic skills at the university. And Deb and Helen have working together and will give their experiences of developing systems and processes to support students on apprenticeships and deliver training in that regard to staff to support students on apprenticeships at Aston University. So I'm going to hand over to Deb and Helen to give their perspective.
Good afternoon, everyone. Deb's just going to move over while I present the slide and then help me to answer questions. Deb and I have been on a roller coaster ride since March last year, when we noticed a sudden increase in the numbers, well, in support requests from students on degree apprenticeship programmes. There'd been a rollout of 16 programmes across the 3 academic schools, but nobody had had a conversation with the student enabling team about how students with learning difficulties and learning disabilities would be supported. Does that sound familiar? I'm guessing there'll be some nods in the audience. So after a little bit of digging around, we found out that there was a degree apprenticeship team, but its concerns were largely operational. Onboarding, so I don't like the term, but onboarding students and administering the funding from the Education Skills Funding Agency. To cut a long story short, we've had to work things out for ourselves. We experienced what you might describe as a loop-to-loop moment in April, because we found out, we were not told, but we found out that there was an Ofsted inspection pending in June. Now, fortunately, a new academic quality director was appointed, and we were able to check out our understanding of the ESFA funding provider rules with her. And yes, we haven't been out of our office really much since. So we're really delighted to be invited to the conference this afternoon. We're fairly confident now that we've got a more complete picture of how we can develop support, specialists and fund specialist support for our degree apprentices. Joe, would you mind putting the slide up for me, please? So I've prepared a slide which sort of encapsulates the 5 challenges or 5 themes we've faced. Number 1, we all know that early identification is essential for the retention and outcomes of students with disabilities. The main challenge we face at Aston is that there are currently no opportunities, or none that we were aware of, to declare a disability pre-enrolment for apprentices. Consequently, we're finding out about the support needs of apprentices at enrolment, during induction activities, or when they get into difficulty with an assessment, which is not ideal, as I'm sure you would agree. There is a potential solution for us, we feel. We've learned that the degree apprenticeship team have started to use a screening mechanism or tool, App10, and we're hoping that that will help us to identify apprentices with learning difficulties at point of entry in September. Yeah, so that was our first challenge. The second challenge, we're finding that after we've identified apprentices, put in the specialist support, advised about learning resources and professional support university-wide, that they struggle to find time to access the support available. They come to campus for intense study intervals, and then they go back to very busy workplaces. A potential solution that we're that we've raised is that academic schools and employers could be more accommodating, really, of timetable patterns and appointments. Our third challenge has been having the right resources and funding in place. So we want to try to provide a DSA equivalent package for of support for our apprentices. So we've been drawing down a monthly ALS payment, additional learning support payment of £150 to fund one-to-one tuition and mentoring support and assistive software licenses. However, we're finding the evidencing of learning needs and monitoring and tracking of support very time-consuming, alongside our other casework and duties. Okay, point 4. Well, this is our approach. We haven't really spoken to other universities about what they're doing. We did send out an SOS to NADP, but we found that people were more interested in how we were going about it. So we'd welcome any suggestions that you may have. So first of all, we review evidence and we're undertaking an in-house individual needs assessment and producing a report for each learner. We've sort of scaled back. It's sort of like a scaled back version of a DSA needs assessment report. Secondly, we are drawing down the ALS for apprentices with a confirmed diagnosis and for learners and apprentices who don't have a formal diagnosis but do have a well-documented history of learning support needs from a former school, college, or higher education provider. Thirdly, we've chosen to use an external supplier, our preferred DSA supplier, to provide specialist tuition and mentoring remotely. Mainly because it has the flexibility to offer evening and weekend appointments. Number 4, we do monthly tracking of attendance and costings because the rules stipulate the provider has to demonstrate continuing need for funding of reasonable adjustments. In addition, we do progress reviews with apprentices where we review all of the reasonable adjustments in their individual needs assessment report. So that's how we're going about it. As I say, it's very time consuming and labour intensive. The feedback we've had from apprentices has been very good. They are happy about the quality of service the enabling team are providing. However, they have raised concerns about the teaching reasonable adjustments not being applied consistently in the academic schools. So in response to this, we've just started to deliver training sessions. Our first one last month was with the academic skills coaches, and they support apprentices with their professional practice portfolios. We're feeling slightly more comfortable talking to you today because we had some exciting news last week. We've been sort of like talking to our Director of Welfare about the problems we've encountered, and he put in a bid for extra staffing. So going forward, we're very fortunate in that we're going to be able to recruit a disability advisor specifically for apprentices. And he's also going to let me advertise for another specialist academic tutor. So that's where we're at the moment. Thank you.
That's brilliant.
Have any questions?
Yep, thank you very much. Excuse me. That was really interesting. I mean, actually, I think what's come through there really is the fact you've had to do so much yourselves. You know, in terms of actually from a service, you know, put all those systems in place. We've been quite lucky now in Trent. We've had a central team supporting us, you know, to do a lot of the administrative, the claiming, and you know, getting the financial systems in place. But what I took out of that as well was also training for the academic skills teams as well, and I think that's something we want to look at too. So I think we're all learning from each other. So thank you very much, Helen and Deb, for that. Do you have any questions? We've got 5 minutes. We've got 5 minutes for questions. Yeah,
we've got a couple of questions in the chat actually. So Jane has asked, can you confirm that you are downloading the £150 each month for every apprentice who has a diagnosis and that you have assessed?
As far as we're aware, it is being downloaded. That is being done by different departments, but what we're doing is that we are, every time we refer a student for the ALS support, we notify them and the date it commenced, and we that's another department then that puts that onto the system and downloads the funding. One of the problems that we had is that we're basically having to pay for the support ourselves through the enabling team and then drawing it back from finance. So our problem is that although the students have been having the support, we're not worried about that. We've been paying our external provider, but the internal team, the finance team, have been very slow in refunding us back the money.
Yeah, it's a bit of a triangle. The degree apprenticeship team flag the ILR, the individual learning record of the apprentice, and as we understand it, a member of the finance team draw down the £150 payment and are responsible for transferring it to our disability contingency fund. But there is currently a large hole in that fund because we're not receiving this payment is not being transferred across as we would like, and that is something we've asked our director to look into.
And how do you cope with the fact of if students aren't taking up support? I think so Jane said that she's got a very similar triangle going on at Nottingham Trent. Is there a way you manage it because you're not supposed to be drawing down the funding if it's not being used? Do you have any kind of start-stop mechanism for that, or are you just hoping that it all works out by the end of the year?
What we're doing is that every month our provider is providing us with a spreadsheet of the students who have accessed the support and who haven't accessed it, so we can put a stop on it straight away. We're not saying that that's ideal, because we do have to rely on being told that they're not accessing it, and then you have to pick that back up if a student wants to take it back up again 2 or 3 weeks later. So it's like a continual memento of that. What we have been told is by the degree apprenticeship team is that you can do like a reconciliation at the end of the year, so you can make up or take down where there might be some instances where perhaps somebody we've been overpaid or underpaid. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so I've got another question for you. Are there any areas of student support and disability support service delivery where you needed to make significant changes to meet the Ofsted requirements?
Just a minute, got my glasses on. No, not really, because we do have the dyslexia in-house screening, which we're very lucky to have. So we can use that. We've been accepting evidence of history of need, e.g. a Form 8, for some years now, and we have confidence in using our supplier for tuition and mentoring going forward. And we have secured extra staff for our area to do it. And we're also lucky that we do have some in-house support. We have note takers, scribes, prompts, and we have some study assistants. And in some instances, I've used that resource as well to top up the ALS fund because it's sometimes just not enough. So we are able to do that. So we've been quite lucky in that respect.
Okay, got another question from Emma, and she's asked, are you looking at assistive technology requirements for apprenticeships as well, or just focusing on non-medical helper support needs at present?
No, we're doing both. I mean, at the end of the day, what we want to do obviously is create a time where students are less reliant on human support and more reliant on assistive technology that supports them in the workplace as well. And to that, I was very lucky at the very beginning when we started. I did get some support, so some funding for some assistive technology for students, but that is something that we are doing as well. And we also have some licenses at the university, which we've been able to like glean, which we've been giving out to the students. I got some licenses for Dragon. We do have free tools for learning at the university, and we give them all access to that as well. So read and write gold. Yeah, speech to text.
We will for the September intake. We want to buy a bundle of text help read and write and Equatio. We have a lot of Aston, a lot of STEM subjects, so engineers and business students actually who would benefit from some a tool to support numeracy skills.
Been asked specifically about purchasing laptops. I know that, like at our institution, for example, we found that students often had laptops through access to work, so it was just for study assistive technology that we helped with. But I'm just wondering whether that's the same for you guys.
We're not going there.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? The laptops, we've tried to avoid that really as much as possible. We've had one or two, I think, but the majority have had one in place now too. So, yep, that's brilliant. Thank you, Deb and Helen. Thank you very much for that. So we're ready to move on to the next presentation. It's from Marissa Hill at Sheffield Hallam University. Marissa is the Disabled Student Support Service Manager at Sheffield Hallam. Marissa recently joined our board of directors as well in 2022, if I'm right saying, and also has a background in education, having taught English as a second language abroad for a number of years, and has also recently completed the MBA in, if I'm right in saying, in higher degree apprenticeship. Marissa's actually not unique position to be able to speak as a service manager, but also to give a flavour of the student experience as well, really. So if you're ready to go, Marissa, yeah.
I am, yes, thanks, Gary. Joe, do you mind putting up my slides, please? Thank you. Yes, thanks, Gary, and thanks everybody for coming. This is quite an interesting topic. I remember when the apprenticeships started coming through at Sheffield Hallam, I don't think we knew what was happening, and it got very busy very quickly. And I was one of the first apprenticeships on the higher degree apprenticeship at Sheffield Hallam, so it was very much an immersive experience for me. And I learned a lot on my MBA, but also about student support and what it's like to be an apprenticeship student. And as Gary said, yes, I'm the head of disabled student support at Sheffield Hallam University. But I've only been in this role 1 year. Previous to that, I was the head of the Sheffield Regional Assessment Centre. So interesting for me to come from the supporting disabled student support allowances students through the processes as well. Can you move on to the next slide for me, please, Jessica? Thank you. So I thought Sheffield Hallam apprenticeship provision is quite large, I think, in the sector. And we have nearly 2,000 apprenticeship students, and that is increasing. So we have quite a wide area of sectors that we cover, mostly local, and these include the police and the NHS, but also other areas such as architecture, construction, engineering, leadership and management, which is the MBA area which I did. We have many undergraduate and postgraduate courses. However, the number of students that are sharing a disability with us is much lower than our average. So our average is around 20%, but with our apprenticeship students, we're only seeing 12% of students that are sharing a disability. Perhaps, like Helen said, this is because students aren't telling us before they arrive. Maybe they're not thinking that they want to share that at enrolment. So we're not always getting to those students. I think also we have a lot of students who are mature students. So I perhaps thinking that mental health or dyslexia might not be classed as a disability. So that's another area where we're trying to improve awareness of the support that's available for students and how to access our services. Some good news for us is that we've got through Ofsted. So we have been rated as a good provider for apprenticeships. I'm happy to share any information about that with people offline if they want to know about how we worked with our team to do that. It's definitely a growth area for us at Sheffield Hallam University, and I can say that we definitely have needed more resource to support our students. So that's something that I can definitely hear from what Helen and the University of Aston's experience is. So if we move on to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about our disabled student support offer. So like Helen and Aston University, and I imagine a lot of other universities, we do treat students equitably, not dependent on their funding. So we look at the needs of a student. However, we do use the DSA model to help us do that. So we also offer individual support through an individual assessment and our disabled student support services. We did base this on the DSA provision. So we talk to students about what equipment they already have, software that they might already be using, and any other support that they've had in the past. We are lucky at Hallam in that we do have quite a good inclusive offer. So we can offer students training, group training on Microsoft 365 tools, and we do those sessions to all students. So whether they have a disability or not. We also have some MindView licenses, and we offer group training on MindView. And we have Glean sessions as well. And one of the benefits that has come out of the pandemic and the ways of working is that we've been able to move all of that group work online, and it has really benefited apprenticeship students, because they were always struggling to access our sessions on campus. Even if we offered a twilight session, often we have students that are studying and living across the country. We also offer students a learning contract, so that's our reasonable adjustments plan. And like I said, we do offer support to Ofsted, understanding who our students are, monitoring and reviewing students' progress. However, that is quite challenging. So yes, very much like Helen said, we treat students like as much as possible equally. So non-DSA students, international students and apprenticeship students would all be supported in a very similar way. If we move on to the next slide, we can talk through some of the issues and considerations. So one of the things that we realised quite quickly is that some students were applying for DSA, and that was quite a challenge at the beginning. And we also staff were just not aware of the support for disabled students or our services. And we weren't aware of which courses were degree apprenticeship courses. And I must admit, even now, I think new courses pop up without us knowing. So one of the things that we're trying to do is raise awareness of support, raise awareness of our inclusive support services, and working with the wellbeing learning coaches and course tutors to signpost students to us, so that we know that we're seeing the students that maybe haven't disclosed to us yet or who aren't accessing support. the process is not as established as DSA. So we encounter some of the similar issues that Helen's spoken about in terms of accessing the funding. However, we are lucky enough to have a central team, and they do a lot of the drawing down the funding. However, the sticking point for us is when we ask them to raise the purchase orders. I don't think they work to the same timescales that we would like them to. So that's definitely an area that we want to be able to improve. And it's not just 1 or 2 purchase orders with the numbers of students that we're having. So it is something that we need to think about. Another thing that's been brought up is the evidence requirements. And this has had a bit more of a wider implications on our service delivery, as we're beginning to think about what evidence do we require. And obviously, in light of the Bristol ruling recently, it's making us rethink some of our decision making around evidence and support. Some good things are that we do have more autonomy in our decision. We don't get rejections. We haven't had any of our support recommendations declined, and we don't have a limited SSE list. So from a working and assessment centre, that's a very positive thing. But as I said, we are relying on the systems of our main apprenticeship provider, vision provider, to put through the purchase orders. They do have a system as well called MATAS, which tracks progress of students. So we do have access to that, and that is quite useful for us. And we do fund specialist support tutors and mentors, so we can get live updates on how students are doing and if they're accessing support. But it's definitely created more administration for our team, and it takes up a lot of our disability advisor time to do the assessments, and our assistive technology to make recommendations and demonstrate and do training for students as well. So I thought I might just finish on the next slide talking a bit about my experience of being a student. Like I said, it was quite an immersive experience as being the first apprentice on a higher degree for the MBA. It was challenging working full time, and that causes a lot of study issues, managing your workload, and quite heavy workload for study as well. The block teaching was quite intense. So we were in 9 to 5, 3 to 4 days a week, and it was quite relentless at times. Also, whilst you're doing the study and working, you need to be thinking about collecting data for your endpoint assessment and how you're going to present that data. So I had to do a portfolio of the work over 3 years and what the learning had been put into practice with evidence, such as emails and project reports, presentations, etc. Then you have a presentation that you do on your dissertation, and you have an interview. So it's quite intense. Some of the things I think were really useful for me were the online resources through our skills centre, and we have Studiosity. I know some universities have that, but essentially it's a proofreading service that was quite quick to get the work back to you. And I think that was really good for keeping motivation and just for time, really. Other things I would do with the library is I would order the books online and then just go to the library and collect them, because I didn't have time to look around the library and gather the books. I'm not sure if all libraries have that offer. The Skills Centre also did lots of workshops, and unfortunately in 2020 was when I was doing my dissertation, so I was a bit stuck for help, and luckily the Skills Centre at our university had lots of online workshops and drop-ins that you could talk about your research and discuss any of the issues you were having, and I found that fantastic, the support that they offered. As I said, we have AT workshops, so I promote this a lot to students that I talk to now that are going through the apprenticeship route, and say there's lots that's available, the Microsoft Learning tools, for example, and what we have as well at the campus. Peer support, we used WhatsApp, and I imagine a lot of courses do use WhatsApp to create a sense of community. As it is block teaching, it takes a while to build a kind of learning community. And I was the first person to do the endpoint assessment, so I didn't know what to expect, but I remember coming out thinking that was quite intense, and probably some of the adjustments that could be made are very much like a Viva or an interview. So I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have about my experience or the service at Sheffield Hallam or our apprenticeship provision. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. That was brilliant. It's just really good to get the student perspective. It really is. Yeah, and actually, in terms of endpoint assessment, the Viva, yeah, that seems to be quite common now. It seems to be quite. We've been putting adjustments in for some students to do that. So, we've got time for a couple minutes for a quick question or two. Have you got any, Anna, yet?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of questions. First one, was there anything from your student experience that influenced or changed the approach of your service in supporting students on apprenticeship programmes?
I think definitely for all of our students about signposting the inclusive practice that we have. So signposting to the skills centre that they can access immediately, signposting to the AT workshops, and the wellbeing service as well, making sure that people are aware of the services that are available at the university and how to access them.
And did you have to change any of the administrative sort of structures or elements of your service to kind of meet those student needs?
Yes, well, we're still working on that. So we do have a project team within our team that's been working on apprenticeships, because we are seeing such a rise in the numbers that we're going to have to streamline the way in which we work. It's just we can't do it fast enough, and we want to do a good job. So we're looking at ways in which to streamline the processes and working with our partners. So shared systems and sharing data and speeding things up slightly. So it's a work in progress. I wouldn't say we're there yet.
I think that's probably the same for many of us at the moment. That's good. Thank you. That's all the questions I've got in the chat at the moment. That doesn't mean that you're necessarily off the hook. We're going to see how things go towards the end, but I think it's probably a good chance to sort of segue into the next bit, Gary, if you're happy.
Absolutely, yeah, that's brilliant. I'd say, and actually, just even the intensity of that of the study, you know, well done, Marissa, for doing that course, as well as leading the services, because we know in ourselves how intense it is. You know, as the last couple of years, you know, leading services in this sector. So that brings on to Lindsay Conroy. Lindsay is the apprenticeship programme lead at UCAS, having joined UCAS in September 2021 from Rickson, and Lindsay's worked in apprenticeships with apprenticeship providers for over 20 years now, so significant experience, and also worked in SEN as well, and more recent in the last 4 years. But Lindsay's going to give us perspective from UCAS in terms of what's been done there, because we've always relied on UCAS for many years as services in terms of the data that's provided to us, you know, in terms of students who are sharing details of their disabilities. So I know there's some exciting developments coming up. So Lindsay, I'll hand over to yourself.
Thanks so much, Gary, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be with you today. As Gary said, I'm the programme lead for apprenticeships at UCAS, and have been with UCAS for little under a year now, having had about 20 years in the apprenticeship sector. So I've spent a number of years heading up quality, compliance, and most recently running an apprenticeship training provider. And I'm really excited to bring that experience into UCAS to be able to develop the services that we're able to offer. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Hopefully you can see a PowerPoint presentation. And I'm really happy to talk to you today about what UCAS are going to be doing to raise the profile of apprenticeships to our student audience. So I think the first thing I'd like to talk about is the data that we're getting at the moment from our students around apprenticeships. And I think it's fair to say that more students than ever are telling us that they want to hear about apprenticeships. So broadly speaking, about 50% of our pre-applicant database are interested in more information about apprenticeships, and we see that that's going to continue to grow. So you'll see that mid-cycle in 2021, the number was about 150,000, and then mid-cycle of 2022 it was up to about 350,000. And actually, as it stands today, we're well over 400,000 students wanting to know more about apprenticeships, and that's students that are in the current cycle. So the numbers are ever growing, and the registrants already for the next cycle, we're well in excess of 50% of those registrants wanting to know more about apprenticeships. So there's a lot that UCAS are doing to be able to surface that information to our student audience and to give them the information that they're asking us for. And I think it's fair to say that UCAS is a really trusted source of information and advice for all of those people. Without going into lots of detail here, you'll be aware of the network of advisors that UCAS have and the events that we run every year. UCAS.com attracts over 30 million visitors a year, and our careers quiz, which is one of the new tools we've launched, which supports undergraduate courses and apprenticeships, has been hugely popular in the first 6 months that we've had it launched. So there's a lot that we're doing to be able to give the information and advice around apprenticeships to our audience group using, the trusted brand that is UCAS. I think some of what we're finding through the students that we're talking to is that they simply aren't getting the information that they need. So we do a lot of surveys and a lot of work with students. And we know that 1 in 5 students inadvertently closes a door to a future career as early as GCSE options level because they make an incorrect choice at GCSE. We equally know that 1 in 3 students, a third of our students, consider their higher education options as early as primary school age. But that number changes quite drastically when you look at the advantages that those young people have within their background. So students from a more advantaged background are 40% more likely to look at higher education as young as primary school. And then in terms of perception, we know that 87% of people that we've surveyed believe that going to university in the traditional way to do the traditional undergraduate programme, 87% feel that will lead to a good job, but only 57% of people believe that an apprenticeship will lead to a good job. And then the last 2 stats on here are the percentage of students that we talk to that associate the word prestigious with an apprenticeship or with an undergraduate degree. So 76% associate the word prestigious with an undergraduate degree, and only 4% associate the word prestigious with an apprenticeship. So we know that students aren't getting the information that they need and that they are confused about the options that are there for them. And given that we know that an apprenticeship route can often lead to the same outcome as a traditional undergraduate degree, we know that there's a piece of work there to do to really help students understand the options that they have available to them. We know that the student journey is difficult, so we know that awareness is low. And when I talk to people about this, what I often say is that students have a hurdle to overcome before they even know that an apprenticeship exists, because they quite simply don't get the information and advice they need about an apprenticeship, and therefore that creates stigma around it. If they happen to find out from maybe their network or somebody at school that an apprenticeship's an option for them, they then have a hugely confusing piece of work to do to research apprenticeships, because actually what's on the internet could be out of date. I mean, it's a complete minefield of information and advice out there, quite frankly, in terms of whether it's in date, whether it's accurate, whether it's correct, etc. And that leads to a lot of confusion for our student audience. And beyond that, then we know that searching for an apprenticeship is really challenging, because students quite simply don't know where to start. And there's so many different places that they can go to look for an apprenticeship, whether that's through government websites or jobs boards, employer sites, or providers directly. And that leaves students feeling really uncertain about how to find an apprenticeship. And then when it comes to applying for an apprenticeship, they're actually applying for a job. And more often than not, students don't realise that. Their teachers and advisors don't realise that. And that application process can vary differently between one apprenticeship to another apprenticeship. And then that can lead to significant stress for young people. And then when we move on to the interview process, and not understanding perhaps how to present themselves at interview, etc., maybe what assessment centres look like, what competency interviews look like, etc., etc., that can be, again, incredibly challenging for young people, leading to real anxiety around the interview process. So there's a lot at UCAS that we feel that we can do to really support this and to really help students be able to navigate that journey in a way that takes away the negative feelings that they associate with it. So we've actually put it at the heart of our strategy. So our 2025 Discover Your Future strategy puts apprenticeships right at the heart of it and takes UCAS to a place where we become a discovery brand for young people to help give them the information and advice and guidance they need across all higher education pathways, including apprenticeships. So just to talk a little bit about what we're doing at the moment, on ucas.com there are a few different pages around apprenticeships. So we're offering employer profiles, which allows an employer to provide a shop window to a student as to what it's like to work there. What we found by talking to students is they know what they're going to get if they choose the traditional 3-year undergraduate route. It's packaged up for them really nicely and they understand what's going to happen. But when it comes to an apprenticeship, they really don't understand what that might look like. They tend to be quite fearful about perhaps the social aspects, etc. So we've launched employer profiles to enable students to be able to see a little bit about what it might look like to work at a number of different employers. And we've also launched industry guides as well. These launched in National Apprenticeship Week this year, so back in February, and they're around the 18 key industries. And what they do is they set out what it's like to work in different industries for students. And they're populated predominantly with the student voice. So other people like our students that are already doing apprenticeships in these sectors have provided video content for our students to watch. And actually our industry guides have probably been, in fact, not probably, have definitely been the most successful content we've put on ucas.com in quite a significant amount of time. And then we also have Career Finder as well, which is our apprenticeship search tool. It's not just limited to apprenticeships. We also advertise graduate jobs and internships on here for employers and providers. Yeah, Career Finder, the search tool for jobs, is the tool that's available. You can get to it via ucas.com, and it enables a young person to be able to search for opportunities. And we've seen huge amounts of growth over the last 12 months. All of this kind of linking back to the fact that we know that our students want more information about apprenticeships and they're really hungry for it. So really then to talk about what the future looks like for UCAS in this space, just to share a very high level timeline. So we're really ambitious and we're really ambitious to offer a really sophisticated service to our students to really be able to serve our student audience. So within this calendar year, so by the end of 2022, what we're looking to do is take our Career Finder service that I've just shown you has seen significant growth and integrate it into ucas.com, so it becomes part of the core journey for students and they're able to access it and utilize it in a very user-friendly and easy manner. We're looking to do some more development on our industry guides, so to enable providers and employers to get more involved in the industry guides. And then we're working on some apprenticeship specific information, advice and guidance content that's greater than what we currently have. Interestingly, in the next 2 weeks, we've got a new apprenticeship page launching on ucas.com around disabled apprentices and the support available for them. And we've got a policy report in our Where Next series launching at the end of June around the experiences of disabled students in education. Into 2023, we're looking to launch a new service called Talent Finder, which will enable employers to be able to mine the UCAS data and approach people that have made themselves open to be approached for job opportunities, but approach people that meet their needs. So any employer will be able to register for Talent Finder and will be able to set a specific set of criteria around what they're looking for their vacancies. And that criteria may be around qualifications, it may be around skills, it may be around hobbies. We're exploring whether we can have ED&I targets included within there. And then any people matching those particular sets of criteria, employers will be notified of in a absolutely confidential way, and the young person will then be able to choose whether or not they want to share their data with the employer and be invited to apply for a vacancy. And then we'll be looking to do more work around Career Finder to integrate it even in an even more deeper manner to ucas.com, so that we're able to show students apprenticeship opportunities alongside undergraduate courses. Then into 2024, we're looking to streamline the application options for apprenticeships by offering an application service for students and for employers that choose to sign up for it, whereby students will be able to use the data they've already entered into their UCAS account to apply for an apprenticeship opportunity. And we're looking then to be able to serve up personalised content to students. So to be able to say, people like you went on to be successful in things like this. And then we're looking there to be able to provide a real matching service for students, to be able to match students to opportunities that are open either via providers or employers. So then by 2025, which is the end of our Discover Your Future strategy, we'll be looking to create parity to the undergraduate experience. So whatever we have available in the undergraduate experience for students, we want to have the same available in the apprenticeship experience. For employers, we want to offer screening services to help reduce the burden on recruitment for employers. And then we also want to launch an apprenticeship clearing programme. So to take unsuccessful apprenticeship applicants from perhaps a large employer and move them through the supply chain to perhaps more local SMEs, to be able to really match students to other apprenticeship opportunities that may meet their needs and to really meet the changing demands of the labour market. So there's quite a lot. We're really ambitious in this space. There's an awful lot going on. And I'm really happy to take any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you, Lindsay. I did say what was exciting, because personally I find very exciting the prospect that actually a lot of, most of the applications are going to go through one area, UCAS, because ultimately, let's say we've looked to UCAS for our figures and, of students sharing disability and actually be able to catch apprentices and support apprentices through that process. It's really exciting. It's the perfect, it's the right place for it to go through longer term. It really is. So, no, thank you very much indeed. I've got a few minutes for questions.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of questions. So the first one is, what are you noticing in terms of the number of students who are accessing the UCAS website and making inquiries in relation to degree apprentices? And I know you had that slide that showed that had really shot up basically in recent years. I'm wondering whether sort of like within that question, you've got any idea about the number of kind of disabled apprenticeships or people who with disabilities who might be interested, compared to the sort of more traditional degree route? Is it an attractive an offer?
So I think anecdotally, yes, it is as an attractive an offer. As I showed on the slide, we've seen the numbers increase significantly, particularly in the last 2 to 3 years in terms of the interest. What we've done for this cycle, as in the cycle we've just launched, the 23 cycle, is we've created what we're terming our widening participation questions, which really starts to delve into more detail around the individuals that are registering with UCAS. So this time next year, what we'll have is quite a lot more detail that sits behind the types of students showing an interest in apprenticeships, to be able to really clearly understand at that very early discovery stage if young people that are either coming from a socially disadvantaged background, a first in family, or have a disability, etc., will be able to see if there are any, I guess, any areas where there's a higher demand there, and we'll be able to analyse that in much more detail.
That kind of links, there's another question which is about, can you advise on processes of disability disclosure from the student's perspective within your future plan? So you've talked about Talent Finder and the matching service. Will there be any indication of employers who have the disability confident accreditation, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we can't force disclosure. We, as part of our journey, what we're doing is trying to work with our students to help them understand why we're asking questions, because we can't ever force somebody to disclose. But if we can support our students to be able to understand the benefits of disclosing, then we're more likely to get that disclosure there. And then we'll have that at a stage where we wouldn't ever pass it along directly to an employer. So we would never say this student has this disability, therefore they may be suitable. But within, say, Talent Finder, and there's a number of moral and legal questions here that we're asking ourselves and relevant teams, is if an employer wanted to say, we want to increase participation amongst employees, or we want to increase our employee numbers of people that are disabled, they may be able to put that as a flag against their searches, for instance, within Talent Finder, without seeing any detail. And in the same way, they may be able to then ask for any specific adjustments that may need to be made, interview, etc. And then I'm trying to think what the second part of that question is. I'm absolutely racking my brains to remember the second part of that.
I've totally dismissed it. Hold on. Let me just find it again.
I think I can.
It was about
accreditation, wasn't it? And
yeah, whether you can look up employers by their accreditation status.
So actually, the iteration of our employer pages that is happening, in fact, it's starting this month and it will run over the next 8 weeks, will allow particular kite marks and flags on the employer pages. So employers will be able to show that they have maybe disability confident accreditation, but also be able to provide more information and context behind that. And I think that's what's important. And conversations we've had previously are around that perhaps that kite mark isn't the be all and end all, but being able to describe what employers do that makes them supportive of disabled employees, and give real life examples. And a lot of that we're doing in our IAG, our information advice and guidance, and our video content for students, because I think it's really important to our student audience.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think for us, one of the biggest challenges is about sort of getting students to tell us about their disability. And I can imagine there's an extra layer when you're maybe telling an employer about it. And so there's sort of that sort of work we can do with employers to make them understand what that information means, and to sort of potential applicants to make them feel comfortable in sharing, I think is massively beneficial to everybody.
For sure.
Someone has asked, are you working with any particular student groups or organisations when you're sort of developing these future plans?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We're working with numerous different groups of students, numerous different organisations, depending on the area of development. So depending on whether we're looking for insight and research, whether we want to test things, whether we're looking for employer insight, provider insight. We have an advisory board that we run on Apprentices, or on our apprenticeship strategy, with over 30 members representing higher education providers, further education providers, apprenticeship providers, government, students, employers, etc. So yeah, huge amounts of different groups of people.
That's lovely. Okay, I'm going to do one more question, because then I guess we've got to probably move on. But what would you advise anybody who is looking to access resources on the UCAS website that relating to apprenticeships? Is it very simple when you log onto UCAS? Is it obvious where you go?
It's pretty simple, and it's getting easier. And we're doing a big upgrade to the website actually to make it much more straightforward. So, you know, all the different options for students are right there and in front of them. So yeah, it's really simple.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And it's just, even in its most simple terms, it's actually just pointing students on open days to go to UCAS, and they'll get all the information there. It's just even in those simple terms, really, you know, be able to do that, because at the minute it's a little bit, well, you know, you look here, you look there, different employers, and so, you know, it's trying to make it more stable in that regard. Thank you, Lindsay. So is Simon on the call still? I know Simon has flagged up that potentially he had some signal problems. He may not be with us or not, is he?
It doesn't look like we have Simon. So Trevor, if you're available now, we can go back to Simon after.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Yep, if we could, we'll take Trevor. Simon's sort of has let me know that there's some issues with the signal. If he can't make it on, he has provided me with you know, an overview of his experience, and actually what we'll try and look at is getting that up on the site. We'll talk to him afterwards and put that on the site if he isn't able to get back online, whatever else and all too. But yeah, Trevor, you're in quicker than all too. So if you're okay, Trevor Boland is our digital accessibility officer at HEAD Ireland, and has been working in digital accessibility for quite a number of years, and joined the HEAD family last year, and is going to give some overview of some of the assistive technology that supports our students on apprenticeships, because I think this is really important in terms of actually students being able to work remotely and access that assistive technology remotely. And we did one of my colleagues did assessment into you this morning where that was very much to the fore in terms of easily accessible technology off-site, basically. So yeah, all yours, Trevor.
Yeah, well, no, thanks very much. And it's been great actually listening to all the points that you're making today, because I think we have pretty much the same challenges in Ireland as well regarding not only disability provision and supports in education, but specifically with apprentices as well, because it's still growing and it's relatively new in Ireland as well. So because as well it takes on many shapes and sizes. Some apprenticeship programs can be 10 weeks long, some are 2 years long, some are very condensed, and then others are kind of spread out over time as well, and others would have a lot of work practice. So that's a challenge as well, to balance out the work as well as study life. And again, in Ireland, we're just seeing the range of apprenticeship programs just widening as well. So we've got your standard ones like you know, the bricklaying type of ones, those traditional form of apprenticeship programs, and the widening of those apprenticeship programs as well, that are varying down things like sales apprenticeship programs to even legal ones such as law as well. So it's getting very big. So from an AT point of view, that is, you know, looking very challenging in terms of how to provide AT within all these different contexts. So it was interesting to hear about the maths support as well as the read and write supports, I think in the first presentation as well. So like Equatio and Read Write Gold. So those are challenges in themselves, especially in some of the programs that would be 10 weeks long. That kind of turnover time from not only introducing a student to the concept of AT, which for a lot of students is their first time encountering this as a concept, and then showing them like an AT tool, and then getting them trained up about how to use it, and then encouraging them to embed this AT tool into their everyday education experiences in a 10-week course is very challenging. And in AHEAD, we've done a number of things. We've done a few student surveys. So I'm going to share my screen. I don't have a PowerPoint because I'm trying to lessen the amount of PowerPoints I'm doing, because like I go into a design mode when I do it, and I labor over images for years. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate the AHEAD website. So there are tons of resources, reports, even courses for staff. So even simply showing you the website here, we have some of the main features. So we even have accessibility courses for staff, and they're just self-enrolled courses for anyone who wants to learn about accessibility, and particularly like teaching staff. There's a course dedicated to them, as well as staff who are managers. as well. So what does accessibility look like from a manager perspective as well, and then how to make accessibility statements. And one of the big things that we also have a big resource for is about assistive technology itself, and we call it the AT Hive. So on our main page, if you click on the AT Hive image, you'll see that this page comes up. And really, this is addressing the need for developing AT awareness. So like I said, I used to be an assistive technology officer in higher education for 7 years. And within that time, I learned a lot about assistive technology from students in terms of their lack of awareness about it and the gaps within all the different levels of education about the term, even assistive technology, and how it was just never named, even if a student did use it. So to lessen the stress that this exploration of AT would cause for these AT newbies, we found that there was a need to create a type of tool that allows people to explore AT in a really structured way and to give them very specific information on AT starting points to help them on their journey through academia. So if we click on this, we can see the first question is about just looking at the interests that they would like to explore. So we actually worked with staff in both higher education and further education in Ireland, as well as students from higher education and further education, to help us inform these questions, the different categories of AT that you can just click on, and what was really relevant. So we spent, I think, about 2 months interacting with staff and students about what this should look like so it's relevant to their perspectives. So people can click on one or more of these kind of things that they want to like explore on the day. So reading has come about as our top searched item. So since we launched it 6 months ago, we've had 1,200 searches specifically about reading, which I think is just telling itself that reading is one of the biggest challenges for lots of different students. You can explore note-taking, for example. Spelling and grammar is our second most searched item as well in terms of AT. So already that's telling us a lot about what students are finding as kind of key challenges in terms of their academic studies. So I can click more if I want, but for now, I might just leave it at reading. So I click on to question 2 of our 3 questions. And we found that this was, I thought this was going to be a very straightforward question, but it isn't. So what, well, actually, what sort of technology students have available to them is a much different question than what students actually own. So we tried to make it very generic as the ownership of technology became quite a sensitive matter with students. So we found that most students would have at least access to maybe a Windows computer either at home or in the college or wherever they study. And then Android devices seem to be quite common as well. And then to a lesser extent, the Apple products and the Chromebooks and that. But if a student didn't know their device, which came up from the students, some of them just wouldn't know what device they had, that we added this feature. And depending on which browser you use, when you click on it, it will tell this tool what device you're working from, and then they can move on to the final question, which is the third one. So for most students in Ireland, anyway, they seem to have a Microsoft access. Some colleges and universities even have both Google and Microsoft. And actually that posed interesting questions as well, because some students didn't know that they had both. And it was interesting, those conversations about the lack of awareness, even about like even whether they had Microsoft, because they just would register or log in with their student number, and they weren't aware that they were using Outlook even. So that prompted them to just explore those tools themselves a little bit more, whether they had Microsoft or Google. So showing the results means that it'll, first of all, draw up all your answers here, so you can click on these and you can minimize the searches if you want to get a more succinct search if there's too many items. You can search all results or even the free tools. So if I click on free tools, that means that it'll only pull up the free tools available from my searches. And Immersive Reader, strangely enough, comes up as one of the tools for a student to explore as regards reading. Also Lens, another Office 365 tool. So if they want to learn more about, say, Immersive Reader, they click on this and there's a web page dedicated to that specific tool with an image, really succinct points, as well as just bullet points about what this tool can do, and even a video. And this is a video that we took from an event that we had here in Ahead about how to use the immersive reader tool. And this was from someone in higher education who advocates the use of immersive reader. So already this tool is to get a lot of traction. So not only from students and staff, but also for, as we're finding in further education, where there's not always dedicated staff for disability support, that they're referring to this tool to help them navigate what AT supports to provide for their students as well. So it's kind of taken a life of its own, and we're going to be updating it as we go along and developing it further, depending on the feedback that we've been getting. So we've had quite a bit of feedback. So over the next few months, we might just be adding more assistive technology. So currently there's about 50 types of AT, and we're adding extra ones as well. So CaptionEd, which is a captioning tool, we just literally got a write-up there the other day, and people can contribute to this as well. So we have a template that people can use and download, and that's within the site itself. So if you want to submit a write-up, it's just here as well. So we can get people like yourselves from anywhere to just, you know, feel they might spot a gap within our resource, and that's perfectly fine. And then there's a short Word document that we get people to fill up and submit. And we've had quite a few of those, both from staff and students as well. And then actually 5, I think, even came about mental health kind of awareness as well. So we actually created a category to fill in that kind of AT gap within the resource. And I just want to show you 2 other things. So we have in our site like loads of publications about this, and one in particular that I want to draw your attention to is one called Learning from Home. And it is a report that was made from students giving us feedback and filling in surveys about their experiences during the pandemic. And from an AT perspective, there was a number of insights into that, which told us that students are finding that they were getting AT, but it was the training that was the biggest kind of gap for them. So getting that kind of training to help them kind of embed and use those ATs in everyday situations needed to kind of be kind of fulfilled slightly more. But the good thing about the pandemic is, in terms of AT support, was that it increased AT usage. So we saw it almost double from the first year of the survey to the second year. So in terms of helping students to be more independent, and I think there was a point earlier in the first presentation about use of technology to support student independence, is that, you know, we're hoping that this kind of lasts, this student ownership of assistive technology. So one, that more training will provide us to support the students not only use the tool, it will lessen AT abandonment, which unfortunately can happen. And like that, when I was an AT officer, sometimes students would take something like a LifeGrant pen or something and try it out and then not use it. And then through emails or even face-to-face meetings, you find that they just weren't using it. And there was just potential there, you know, for the student to actually maybe just overcome whatever barriers were stopping it. So, and you're probably seeing from an AT support as well that some pieces of assistive technology kind of highlight an issue. So with invisible disabilities, in particular, a tool like a dictaphone or a LiveScribe pen, which can then kind of flag an invisible disability as a visible one, can be a barrier as well. So creating those inclusive learning environments. And again, I think that kind of theme has kind of been coming across in the session as well. That's definitely definitely developing. Like we're seeing more students register every year. So something good must be happening in not only higher education, further education, but in primary and secondary schools in Ireland as well. That disability support and AT support are becoming more common, and the awareness is there, and that's helping us to destigmatize, you know, things like, you know, assistive technology, and especially with Office 365 and even Google, that we're seeing more possibilities as these AT-like tools in Office 365 and Google, especially with apprenticeship programs, because they're kind of embedded, like dictation, for example, is now embedded in Word in Office 365. So So that means that the student then can access dictation straight away as soon as they have their dictation, their Office 365 account. And that means that, you know, obstacles before, like the AT turnover, like a staff member having to order Dragon, wait for Dragon to come in, then make the time with the student, train Dragon. At least now with these more immediate tools like dictation and immersive reader, that the students can, you know, start embedding assistive technology into their work practices from the get-go. And even we're having in further education in the City of Dublin ETB, that we are seeing that one staff member is starting to embed assistive technology awareness around immersive reader and dictation within the induction process of students. So she'll be taking groups of 5 students over that first week of them starting in college and showing them like immersive reader and dictation in Word to already preempt, you know, that I suppose that gap, that demand for that kind of level of support as well regarding reading and writing. So, and then one last document that I want to show you as well, that we have this publication. So if anyone's new to Universal Design for Learning, we published this about, I think, 3 years ago. And it's about this UDL practice, specifically within further education. And there's one case study about a staff member in further education who working with apprentices. And I think that would be kind of useful in the context of this conversation to explore. So I'm just going to share that link with you in here, should you wish to see it. Because what we're finding with Universal Design for Learning is that it's giving greater weight to assistive technology, as AT is kind of within the UDL kind of guidelines. And this UDL framework, which aims to be really inclusive, get people thinking about different ways to get them looking at their teaching and their work practices, that it kind of really clears up how you interact with students, what kind of resources or diversity of resources that you can consider in terms of kind of clicking with and you know, really interacting with successfully students, and then as well as different in terms of assessment types as well, to help different types of learners you know, be as effective as they can by giving choice around assessment types as well. So I hope that's kind of given you a little bit of information just in terms of assistive technology in what we're trying to strive for in ahead, but also within the apprenticeship programs as well, that we do link with apprenticeship programs, that we are aiming to draw more awareness about, you know, thinking of Office 365 as a stepping stone to paid technologies as well. So like I said, immersive reader and dictation are tools that we see there, and in the long term of those students, because we're seeing some students actually migrate from apprenticeship programs into college programs, as well as work practices as well, that these Office 365 tools are really transferable into different contexts, and in particular with the work context, that, you know, that immersive reader and dictation tools alone provide assistance with reading and writing, and that's turning out to be quite successful. So we're really hoping we can kind of grow and develop that AT awareness further in apprenticeship programs in Ireland. So thanks very much.
Brilliant, Trevor. Thank you.
Okay.
Just before I take any questions, I don't know if Simon made it onto the call or not, but if he hasn't, I will look to get his experience put on the website, because it was really, really interesting from a student perspective. Actually, it a really good experience as an apprentice, and I want to just say, you know, I think it's interesting. We can all learn from good experiences. And aware as well, where we're on up to, we've got about 7 minutes left, and if anybody's, in case someone need to leave early, just to plug again our in-person events taking place in London, University of the Arts, Swansea. I still can't remember the location, but it's in Swansea. On our website for Wales, and in Scotland, Edinburgh, April, and at Ulster University in Belfast. And I'm going to pop down to that one myself, so I look forward to seeing colleagues at that. So I really would encourage anyone to come along to that. So we've probably got a few minutes for wrap up for a few questions for Trevor. Yeah.
Yep. So, well, actually, Trevor, your presentation was so good it preempted some of the questions that have actually come through. Like in your last 5 minutes, you answered some of them, which is great. I guess people are very interested in the mainstream software like Office 365. I mean, I guess because it is so common and people often already have it. My personal experience is that it's so widely available, but sometimes people don't know what it does.
Oh yeah.
So in a way, the challenge is not so much using it; it's learning that it's there to be used. Have you got any tips for us as sort of practitioners in terms of making people more aware of it?
Yeah, well, because I used to be an AT officer, and because it was such a silo discipline, you supported students one-to-one. I'm kind of pushing out because some of these tools, like especially in Office 365, are so good that I think assistive technology is kind of becoming everyone's business. Because when I've demonstrated this to even staff, that there's now potential, because these tools are available to both staff and students, is to model the use of assistive technology. And we've had this one staff member called Carrie Archer in City of Dublin ETB models the use of immersive reader in her class. So instead of her reading out a document to her students, she gets immersive reader to read out the document. So that means students in the class can see her using immersive reader, and then and she's not telling them to try it themselves, they're just seeing it embedded seamlessly into the classroom. And then that will encourage them to use it as well. And if anything else, from a teaching point of view, it's like a teaching support. While immersive reader is reading out whatever document is online, gives you time as the educator to get ready for the next part of the class. And then when you start to really explore immersive reader, you see it's in PowerPoint as well, so it can read back PowerPoint as well as lots of other kind of different facets. Even in like the Edge browser, it has it. So now I'm really pushing that, can we all play a role in terms of assistive technology and drawing awareness to not only the tools in Office 365, but just even get people thinking and talking more about AT, and even for reflective articles, because, in modules like study skills and that, reflective blogs are becoming more common. So why not get students to actually explore something like immersive reader or dictation, and in a reflective article, get them to talk about what they found useful or not useful about that particular assistive technology. So really embed it into the curriculum itself. And that's something we're pushing for, because again, there's just this gap around awareness, both for staff and students, about assistive technology. And if there was just a way of melding it more with the curriculum, I think it would just help just not a lot of problems. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I've had a message from Lindsay earlier that I'm just going to interrupt the questions too briefly because she's had to pop off, but she just wanted to say that she just had a quiet word of warning to some of the advice given on one of the presentations about the use of a supplier to deliver additional learning support, but the supplier would have to be registered as an apprenticeship subcontractor on the register of assistive technology providers, and they may well be, but just if they're not, you just need to bear that in mind and just be a bit cautious about it. So just put a sort of safety warning on some advice from earlier. I've got another question for you, Trevor. Have you also worked with university and work teams in developing platforms to make them more compatible to commonly used AT? So there's that compatibility question.
Oh. Yeah, that's a very nice question. Thank you so much
for doozy, isn't it? Sorry.
Yeah.
3 minutes ago.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, I haven't yet, but what is happening is that we're working with Alistair McNaught for the past year, and what's really interesting with Alistair is that he's highlighted things to me that I wasn't aware of. That a lot of these kind of different tools, these online tools used in education, sometimes aren't accessible. Even though they're added. So for one that is accessible and one that I love, thankfully, is Padlet. So that was great. And then there's another tool that I love. I'm not sure if I can name it, but it's not accessible. So it's been great to kind of see and hear people kind of thinking further about, say, accessibility. So it's not an AT related question, but if something is accessible, then it supports assistive technology use. And I suppose one of the ATs that I'm thinking of is for blind students who use JAWS and MBTA. If you get one of these students, sometimes for some educators, it just turns their teaching upside down because they have to rethink these kind of tools that they use really commonly. So what we are definitely trying to think is like from the procurement stage of thinking about these tools and buying into tools, if there can be just accessibility audits done, and you usually find you can, like, just by Googling about the tool, like I had to Google one the other day, and it's a type of tool where people use really commonly to figure out a time where everyone's available. And we found out that one was riddled with accessibility problems. And that's because there's a member on our board who is visually impaired, and we had to rethink some of the tools. And actually we found we ended up using a Microsoft Office form to jot down all the times in a form, and they could select which multiple times they were available. And we were able to make an accessible version available to everyone about what type of times they were available. And actually, I think it was even easier to use than this commonly used timetabling tool. So yeah, I think procurement is becoming, for me, one of the key points about accessibility when you're thinking about these education tools. And then through thinking about accessibility, you're going to automatically provide better experiences from an assistive technology point of view. So Alistair has been great at just highlighting that level of awareness for me. So I'm happy to share that. Yeah. Okay.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I'm aware that my clock now says that it's 2:30. I want to give you so I just want to thank all of the panelists just before I pass back to Gary, and also thank our sponsors for this week. I think Gary can probably say a bit more about that, but thanks to everybody for attending. I realize that I've got sort of 5 questions here that haven't been answered. Where I've got names, I can post them to the kind of the people who they were aimed at and go back to people via email if that's helpful. So I'll give that a go. But otherwise, thank you very much for participating.
And thank you, Annie, for your help with the questions and co-hosting this afternoon. We've worked together on this now for the last few months, so I hope we could work on something else together in the future. I've really enjoyed it, so thank you. So it's great. So it has, and yes, thank you to our sponsors, ClearLinks, who've been sponsoring the week of material for NADP. And again, I would urge you to go to the conference page, so you'll see we've got some more videos on the website. And we've got Anna himself put together a list of different funding options as well, basically, which is useful with links to the latest sort of funding sources for students with disabilities. Also want to just thank as well Joe and Amy in the background, who've been sort of managing and the IT elements and keeping it all flowing really well and making just life so much easier for us. So thank you so much, guys. And again, they've been absolute warriors in that office over the last few weeks, basically, just supporting all of us, and delivering. And I know they'll be around the next few weeks again, helping out and all too. So thank you for all the work that you guys are doing. And again, thank you to all our panelists for taking part. I found it really enriching. I think there's been a lot of really good tips for us to all take on board, but actually a lot of learning, even for ourselves from NTU. We've been doing this like Marissa has and Deb and Helen has, for a number of years. But we're all still learning, and we're learning from each other. So again, we've picked up a lot out of that. And yeah, I'm just finally just to plug the events, the in-person events at the end of the month, and there's a link there to book in. There's still tickets available for those. So again, thank you to all of you for taking part and coming along, and very much appreciate it. And enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you to our interpreters and to Microlink for organising them for us. Take care. Have a nice week. Enjoy the sun.